Welcome back to Learn with Chris. I'm Chris. In the last video, we began talking about part 5 of the reading test for TOEIC, the incomplete sentences, and we looked at word families. Today, we're going to continue with part 5, but we're going to look at verb tenses. This is another very important part of the reading test, and they'll have a lot of questions where you need to know what tense to use to answer the question. So I'm going to make 4 videos, one about the present tenses, and there are 4 of them, the 4 past tenses, that's the second video, and then the future tenses, the third video. And then in a 4th video, I will put them all together into questions that we can practice. So today we're going to look at the present tense tenses. We're going to look at present simple, present continuous, present perfect, and present perfect continuous. And I'm going to explain what the tenses are, when do we use them, how do we use them, how do we form them, some things to remember and to look for to know you understand the right tense, and then some examples. And I'll do that for all 12 tenses over the next 3 videos. So let's start with present simple tense, and I'm going to put some pictures up on the screen. So you can see here that present simple tense is used for 2 things usually: general truths or facts, and regular actions. So let's talk about that a little bit. General truths or facts is things like science, math, things that are true, things that are facts. So water freezes at 0 degrees Celsius. That's present simple tense. Or the sun is very hot. That's present simple tense. That's scientific facts. Or 1 + 2 = 3. That's also present simple tense. Okay, and we form it by taking the subject and the infinitive verb. Now, the infinitive verb is the first verb. So let me explain that. You probably remembered from school when you learned about verbs in English that they would have these lists, right? Eat, ate, eaten, drink, drank, drunk, go, went, gone, fly, flew, and flown. Well, that first verb in the list, that's the infinitive verb. So the go, the eat, the drink, the fly, that's the verb you have to use for present simple. And we'll look at the second and the third verbs for different tenses. So you use that first verb, the infinitive verb. Now, a thing to remember about present simple tense is that you have to add an S to the verb if it's present simple affirmative and the subject is what we call the third person singular, he, she, or it. Now, what I mean by present simple affirmative is it's a positive sentence, not a negative sentence, and not a question. If it's a negative sentence, like Tom isn't, or Tom doesn't like something, then you do not put S onto like, right? And if it's a question, does Susan swim? Then there's no S on swim because it's a question. Now, Susan likes swimming, you will put an S onto the verb because that's a positive sentence. Does Susan like to swim? That's a question, so there's no S on the verb. So it's very specific, but you have to put the S onto the verb if it's third person singular, he, she, or it, and only in positive sentences and only in present simple tense. It's very specific, but it's wrong if you don't do it. So he like fish, that's wrong. He likes fish. You have to put the S and you have to pronounce it as well. Okay, and let's look at some examples for the present simple tense. I am a teacher. Okay, so that is a truth, that is a fact. So we're using present simple, and we use am here because I am. That's the correct form of the verb to be for the subject I. I am, he is, you are, right? Susan goes to the gym every day. So notice that we're using the verb go, and we're also putting es at the end because Susan is a she, third person singular. We have to put s onto the verb. And same with John works in a bank, so we're also putting an s onto the verb. So the verbs here, the verb to be, go, and work, all infinitive verbs because it's present simple tense. Okay, let's move on with the next one, present continuous tense. And you see here that we use it for 3 reasons. Actions happening right now, so what you are doing right now will be present continuous tense. Temporary situations, so it's currently true, but it may not be true later. And planned future events. This is a little bit kind of confusing, but we do use present continuous to talk about a future event. That is a little bit confusing, but we'll give an example later. How do we form the present continuous tense? We take the subject, is, am, or are. So I am, he is, you are, plus the verb and plus ing. You always have to have ing onto the verb. If you don't, it will be wrong and it will sound weird if you don't. So things to remember about present continuous tense, we have words like now, presently, currently. These indicate that we're using present continuous tense. So I am talking into my phone right now. That is present continuous tense. Or you are listening to this video currently. That is present continuous tense because it's right now. Okay, so some examples. I am talking about a grammar topic right now. So I am talking. So again, subject I, am is the verb to be. So I am. And talk plus ing. Bob is staying with a friend for a few days. Is staying. That's an example of a temporary situation. So he's not going to stay with his friend forever, but it's a temporary situation. And Thomas is going to Japan next week. Is going. That's a present continuous with the future plan, right? Now, there are other ways to talk about going to Japan. And that would be, for example, Tom will go to Japan next week. But that's going to be under the future tense. So we'll look at future simple in a future video. But remember that we can use present continuous tense to talk about a future plan. And that's an example of that. Tom is going to Japan next week. Okay, let's move on. Next one, present perfect tense. I think a lot of students are a bit scared about this one, but it's not as hard as it might seem. So let's look at the uses for this. Actions that started in the past but continue now. So if you started something yesterday and you're still doing it now, that would be present perfect. If you started something 10 years ago and you're still doing it now, that would be present perfect. Talking about life experiences. Now this actually links with the first one because if you think about it, your life started in the past and it continues now, assuming you're not dead. So if you're still alive, your life is continuing. And anything you do in your life, you can talk about it in present perfect way. So you can talk about past simple as well. Like I went to Japan 5 years ago, that would be past simple. Or you could say I have been to Japan, which is present perfect. So you have the choice, right? Either way. But you can talk about life experiences with present perfect. And the last one is pretty complicated, but I'll give an example. Actions recently ended in the past, but there's an effect now. So let me explain that. So it's best to look at an example for that. So let's say you go to the shopping mall. You drive your car. You bring your car to the car park. You park your car, you get out, and you're walking to the shopping mall. You're going to take your keys and you're going to put them in your pocket. But you see your friend and you're like, hey, and you go over and you talk to your friend and you're distracted and you put your hand into your pocket to put your keys into your pocket, but they accidentally fall on the ground and you don't realize it because you're talking to your friend. You go over, you talk to your friend, so you drop your keys on the ground and you don't know. You go into the shopping mall, you go shopping, you have your lunch, you talk with your friend, and 2 hours later, you come out, and then you look and you feel, oh no, I have lost my keys. Present perfect. Even though you lost your keys 2 hours ago, you don't say I lost my keys. You say I have lost my keys because there's an effect now. And the effect now, well, you can't get into your car, right? Because you have lost your keys. If you lost your keys 10 years ago, it doesn't matter now. Then you would just say I lost my keys, right? Past simple. So this is a key difference between past simple and present perfect. Present perfect is affecting you now, even though the action ended in the past. So this one's a bit complicated, but it is a use for the present perfect. Okay. Form. The subject, have or has, I have, he has, she has, it has, plus the past participle verb. That's the third verb. So again, if you remember from school, go, went, gone. Eat, ate, eaten. Drink, drank, drunk. So it's the last verb in that list. You have to use the third verb in that list for present perfect. Things to remember. Okay, so we have for. For tells you how the length of time you've been doing the present perfect action. So as an example, I have lived in Thailand for 20 years. That's how long. Since tells you the start time. So instead of saying I have lived in Thailand for 20 years, I could also say I have lived in Thailand since 2004. So that's the start time, 2004. So it's up to you. You could say for or you could say since, but they're both present perfect. And then we have three other words: yet, already, and just. I have just eaten. I haven't been to China yet, and I have already drunk my medicine or something. These are present perfect as well. So if you hear yet, already, or just, for, and since, all of these are words to tell you present perfect is the tense we are looking at. Okay, some examples. I have been a teacher for 21 years. That's a continuing action. I started 21 years ago and I am still a teacher now. Kevin has been to Germany before. That is a life experience. Now, again, we could use past simple. We could say Kevin went to Germany 10 years ago. That's okay too. We have the option to use present perfect because it's a life experience. And then Lee has lost her keys and now she can't get into her car. That's the example I mentioned about when you when the action happened in the past, but it still affects you now. So for present perfect. Okay, and the last one is present perfect continuous. So let's have a look at this. Okay, now I want to mention something about the perfect continuous tenses. These are all pretty rare, especially the past perfect continuous and the future perfect continuous. Very, very, very rare. We almost never use them in English. If you don't know them, you don't understand them, it's not a big deal because it's like 0.1% of the time. By the way, present simple and past simple collectively is about 80% of phrases and sentences that you will hear. So if you really want to be efficient with your learning, focus on present simple and past simple. And that's 80% of the time you're going to use those two tenses. So it's very time efficient. Something like present perfect continuous or future perfect continuous, they're very rare. So never mind if you don't know them, basically. Okay, but we'll still look at them. So present perfect continuous, used for actions that started in the past but continuing now. And you're like, wait a minute, Isn't that the same as present perfect? Yes, it is, but you'll see. It is the same, but not the same. So, the form, the subject, have or has, again, very similar to present perfect. However, now we use been, verb plus ing. So I have been doing something, or she has been learning something. So the thing to remember here is about stative verbs. And here's the difference between present perfect and present perfect continuous. You cannot use stative verbs or state verbs in continuous tenses. So you're asking, what's a state verb? Well, verbs go into two categories: dynamic verbs or action verbs, and then state verbs, which are conditions or states. So here's some examples, right? So a dynamic verb is an action. So move, run, jump, sleep, eat, kick, punch. These are all actions, dynamic. Most verbs are actions, probably 90% or something. And then the other 10%, they're verbs, but they're not actions. You're not doing anything. It's a state, or it's a condition, or it's a feeling or something. So examples of state verbs would be understand, know, believe, love, and like. So if you know something, you're not doing anything, you know it, right? If you believe something, like you believe in God, it's not an action. If you understand English language, it's not an action, right? So these state verbs, you can't use them in continuous tense. So as an example, you can't say, I am understanding English language. That's wrong. You can't use understanding. So you can't put ing onto understand. Or I am knowing math. Or I am loving my wife, right? It's wrong. You have to use the present perfect. I love my wife. I understand English language. I know math. So actions that start in the past and continue now, you actually have two choices. You could use the present perfect. I have lived in Thailand for 20 years. Or you could use present perfect continuous. I have been living in Thailand for 20 years. And they mean the same thing. So the only difference is if the main verb in your sentence is a state verb, then you can't use the continuous. You have to use just the present perfect. That's the difference. Okay, so let's look at some examples. I have been living in Thailand for 20 years. I just said that. She has been working for her company for 10 years. And Barbara has been doing her homework for a long time. Okay, so that's the 4 present tenses. Next video, we'll look at the past tenses. So I hope to see you in the next video. Thank you for watching. Have a good night. And please like, subscribe, comment. See you next time. Bye-bye.